Right, hello, can everyone hear me okay? If you just throw into the chat if you can hear me, and then we'll know we can get started. Good. So, thank you all for coming. Sorry to hear Wendy's been having some microphone problems. I've been having some webcam problems myself today, so I'm afraid you have no webcam to watch me on. So you just have to listen to my voice and see how we go from there. So, thank you all for coming. A big thank you for Wendy and her team for the organisation they do. I know from seeing the schedules quite what a lot of work it is, and this is my third year presenting at iMoot, and they always do a sterling job to keep everything spinning in the background.
Dal mio punto di vista, quindi io al massimo non è detto che poi sempre qua.
So my talk today is on applications of gamification in a workplace setting. I'll start off just with a bit of background on who I am. My name is Benjamin Wagner, commonly known as Ben, and I currently work for a company called Web Anywhere. I'm based in the UK, and we're one of the network of Moodle partners. In terms of my personal background, I started off my career working for central government in general IT, before moving into more of a web specialism, and moved up to local government in the north of England, in a lovely land called Yorkshire, for those of you that have heard of it. After doing this for a couple of years, I moved more directly into education, first working with adult ed students, and then working directly at a school, where I developed a keen interest and learned a lot about Moodle. After doing that for a while, I was then picked up by Web Anywhere to join their Moodle team. I've done a few jobs there, and currently I'm known as a technical evangelist, which is a mixture of kind of consultant and champion for the software, and kind of trying to lead our way in how we develop things and how we move things forward in the community, which is why I'm here today. As I said, it's my third year presenting at the iMoot. Typically I focus on a school background, but the last year or so I've worked more with workplaces, so I thought I'd do a bit of a perspective from their angle. I'm happy to take questions all the way through. If you just throw them in the chat, I'll try to answer things as they come up. But equally, I'll put up my contact details at the end of the presentation, and I'll add them to the Moodle course afterwards as well. So if anyone later, or if you're watching this later on YouTube, suddenly has a burning need to get in touch, just feel free. So I'm just going to move this to the settings, so we can get a bit more view on the presentation, and we'll get started. So first up is, what is gamification? So it's become one of those buzzwords over the last couple of years, but I always find it's good to start with a definition, because we want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing and that we're not kind of misunderstanding each other. So in simple terms, gamification is using methods found in gaming for learning. Now, when gamification first started coming out as a concept in learning, it was very much talking about actual games that teach. So that computer games or physical games or board games actually had a purpose in educating you about a topic or a campaign or science related or things like that. So that was kind of the starters of it. As time has moved on, it's linked now as well to the methods used in gaming. So gaming's a massive industry, both in online gaming and physical gaming. And there's a lot of methods used in that industry that we can use for learning as well. There's things like competition and competing within groups, making learning actually fun, something someone would engage with voluntarily rather than a chore, and using things like medals and achievements and various rewards. And these are all things that those of us who are common to computer games see a lot in that market. And what's happened over the last few years is that the learning environment has kind of evolved to the point where these things are now used there as well. Now, as I said, this talk is going to have a bit of a focus on workplaces rather than schools, which is common for a lot of the iMoot content. So I just wanted to go through a few of what I view the key differences are between dealing with workplace learning and dealing with school-based learning. Because I found there's a very big gap in the way that they both work, and often that results in, particularly workplaces, being able to learn a lot from schools, as schools tend to be the expert educators. So the key differences from my point of view are, in workplaces you often deal with a lot shorter periods of training. So there are plenty of workplaces that do induction programs that might do easy learning for. Often that's only a couple of weeks long, so it's kind of very condensed. It can often be things like top-ups or accreditation or certifications in certain topics, but you might engage in learning for a number of days or weeks and then sort of terminate until you're ready for the next piece. Obviously, some workplaces do kind of engage in continued professional development on e-learning and constant courses running, but even so, these tend to be more bite-sized topics running through the courses. But if you compare that to schools, where you might be at a school for 5 or 7 years, or even a university for 3 or 4, and you'll probably be using e-learning for the vast chunk of that alongside standard learning. So there is a big difference in the length of the training that you actually engage in. Now, I've mentioned briefly already, but the focus of the training is very different. So a lot of the training you do in school is about a broad breadth of topics. We do GCSEs in the UK, and it's quite common to take anywhere between about 8 and 12 GCSEs. So that's a lot of different topics that you're covering. Whereas a lot of workplace learning is very much focused on the job you're doing or the job you aspire to do, and it's about your continued professional development in that role. So I'm a Moodle expert web anywhere. I'll be learning more about Moodle and other LMSs and learning how they interact. I'm unlikely to take advanced physics just on the side. Could do at home, but it's not something likely my employer is likely to engage me in. Whereas at school, you're trying to get a breadth of knowledge to try to develop you as a person. Now, one of the key things is workplaces often have a much higher turnover of staff. So these days, the concept of a job for life has mostly gone away, and a lot of people stay somewhere between 1 and 5 years at each employer and then move on and do something different. In certain sectors like retail, this can be even shorter. You know, people doing 3-month contracts, 6-month contracts, and then they move on. So you need to focus that learning in, and you can't necessarily factor in being able to build over a 5 to 10 year period. You've got to think, right, how can we train this person up in relatively short time to be an effective employee? Because if it takes you 2 years to induct someone, well, they're probably left by then and you've never quite achieved their potential. The other key thing I found while working with workplaces is you get a lot higher percentage of staff that aren't digital natives. This is a term that's kicked around a lot at the moment. A lot of school children now have grown up with technology always being a part of their lives. A lot of them have tablets and iPads at home. They've probably always had a computer in the house. And even my generation, I'm not that old, but we had one family computer in our home when I was at school, and that was it. Whereas in my house, there's probably a couple of computers, 3 or 4 laptops, and several other devices that are all electronic and connected. Children of today have a lot more exposure to these devices at a very young age. So when they come to school and they're asked to use a computer or to use an e-learning portal, it's not that alien a concept. They're kind of used to using the internet, using computers, and it's quite natural to them. In a lot of workplaces, you actually have people who are not necessarily older, but a lot less experienced in IT. It maybe wasn't such a big focus when they were at school. And what that means is that you've got a much bigger challenge in getting them to adopt an e-learning platform. The other key thing with workplaces is kind of in a direct opposite to a school, is there's a lot less, or often no, dedicated time to learning. There are employers who do this really well and have set learning objectives, and you get time to work on them and develop your skills. But there are plenty of employers who don't really factor that in. They maybe have a 2-week induction program, and after that, all the learning is sort of when you get a chance. It's a big difference from being able to have dedicated time in classrooms and trying to get people to learn that way. Now, the first topic I'm going to bring up on gamification is badges. So I've put on my presenter and my attender badges for the iMoot that I was awarded by the team. I did spot I got a Twitter badge this morning, but I haven't quite had time to add that into the slides yet, so I'll try to get that done for my repeat session. And the Open Badges system is run by Mozilla, for people buying a Firefox browser. And you've probably all received at least one through the iMoot so far. But what this does is lets you award achievements, much in the same way that you would on an Xbox or a PlayStation or on Steam. And these are little awards are linked to some sort of criteria. So for those who haven't used them themselves in their own courses, they can be automatic. So you might say if they've completed a piece of homework or completed a quiz, they get awarded a badge. or they can be manual, where you could award them for effort. Now, what's nice is these become effectively a permanent record, or at least semi-permanent, because you can export them out of your Moodle site into a backpack. And I'm creating quite a nice collection of previous iMoot badges to show off now, so I'm getting quite a few of them, and badges from other places I've been and conferences I've attended and things like that. Now, what's great about these is that a lot of, especially the younger employees, will be immediately aware of what this sort of reward system is. And I've seen good situations where people are, frantically trying to find badges, particularly last year, which is the first year the iMoot had a lot of badges in it. There was lots of us kind of hunting through courses and attending various sessions to see if a badge would suddenly trigger. And equally, you have people competing to collect them all, to coin a phrase for a certain Nintendo game. And what this could mean is that people who aren't naturally inclined to learn and engage with learning suddenly have an additional incentive, and this can encourage them to hunt out those badges and try to track things down. And obviously, as they're doing that, they're learning and they're completing the e-learning that you want them to do. Now, badges are great. There seems to be a fair bit of love for badges even in the group, but there are other forms of gamification in Moodle. And so what I'm just going to just run through is a few of the others that are around and ways you can use them. So the key ones are forums are really great. You can use ratings in forums. If you ever use the forums on Moodle.org, there's a rating system there where you can get particularly helpful Moodler appear next to you when you've had enough helpful ratings. And that can be really good for encouraging peer-to-peer relationships, getting people to build up those communities so that they're talking to each other and rating each other's posts and rewarding each other. But equally, it can be a nice incentive, if you've posted something to someone and they tag your post as helpful. It's just a nice thank you. It's a way of saying thanks, but it can also incentivize someone to be, posting more and try to help people out more to try to get, more of these thank yous. One thing I've seen used to great effect is public exposure of the grade books. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to do this for absolutely everything, but for certain courses, you could open up the grade book and let people see it, so that they can see, what's going on and what everyone's doing. Particularly for learning that's team-focused, and try to encourage them as a team to mentor each other and bring each other up. Exposing the gradebook can be a great way of them seeing what's going on as a team, being able to say, oh, this is great, John's done really well, let's see how John does this, but equally to help mentor the weaker members of the team so that they've got a better chance of passing the training. Now, another aspect is conducting leadership boards. Now, this kind of is a follow-on from opening up the gradebook, and you can do these manually quite easily with a little bit of HTML. Or I've seen a few people develop plugins and adaptations and special screens to show them. But even doing it manually, it's easy enough. And the leadership boards can often come from a similar sort of idea from merits in a school, where you award someone house points. Back in the day, taking me back slightly, sounding very Harry Potter-esque now. But with a business environment, you can have leadership boards that maybe summarize the training per team, show which team's doing the best. You could summarize, the top 5 people for completing this course, or the top 5 quickest, or whatever you'd like. But being able to have those sorts of boards out there where you're saying, these people have the ability to score highly and then get recognized company-wide, can be really nice, particularly if you put them somewhere very visible, like the top of the course or the front page of the Moodle site. People can then go, oh wow, that Team A is doing really well. They're 99th percentile for all their training. That's really impressive. And you often find managers start to compete when these boards appear, and they'll sit in a board meeting. Oh well, my team's position 1 on the board, so why yours down in position 4? And you find you can get a lot of kind of friendly rivalry between the teams trying to outdo each other on the leadership board. The other form of gamification is quizzes and feedback and modules like that. I think it's something that people forget about, but the concept of doing a quiz is a very game-based concept. And I think from that angle, you can have people have quizzes to answer. But sometimes neglected, particularly in workplace feature of the quiz module, is the ability to alter feedback not only per questions but per grade overall, and various percentiles, and really structure the experience through a quiz. What's really nice with this is that you can have users getting positive encouragement. They can be encouraged to go back and repeat, and you can even use things like conditional activities to open up additional resources for someone to go and repeat some work, to go and relearn something, to then come back and effectively beat the quiz. Now, the nice thing about this is people do kind of begin to take it as a bit of a challenge. If it's saying, if the quiz is feeding back and say, oh, you almost got there, but if you can just do a little bit better, you'll be able to, pass the quiz, maybe trigger a badge or move up the leadership board or whatever the incentive is. Quizzes are a great way of funneling that forward and getting people to, take it almost personally that they want to beat the quiz and to move on through the course. Now, what I've been doing over the last couple of weeks is talking to clients that we've been dealing with about how they've, used gamification and how they've implemented it. I was trying to acquire some screenshots, but people are a bit cagey about exposing their own staff data. So one of the top ones is leadership boards, as I've mentioned already. The most common use that we've seen for them is showing percentages or numbers of training completions. So if you have certain parts of training on your Moodle that must be done, so let's say it's a health and safety course, there's a fire safety course, rather than using the stick approach and having HR go and threaten people and going, you've got to get this done, this is a requirement, we found leadership boards are a good carrot approach for that sort of training, where it's showing, Team A is up to 95% compliance, but Team B is only on 60%. The nice thing with that is you can actually remove a lot of the barriers to training. So we've talked about things like where people have gone, oh, well, I'm really busy and I'm struggling to get some time to do training. But if they're in Team A and they're, let's say, some programmers, and Team B is a similar team and also very busy, but they've managed to get their training done, and actually encourage people to kind of put those excuses to one side and say, well, actually, if they've made the time, then maybe we can too. And you often find the need to kind of force people into doing training begins to go away because they just say, oh, falling behind, we're sliding down the leadership board, let's go and update. And even if you're doing them manually, you could do them, as a weekly on a Friday afternoon leadership board. You just check the courses for the completions and update the board. So it's not a huge amount of work from your training team or your HR team to keep these things up to date. Another thing we've seen with clients is about forum post rating, where they'll often do information on top-rated forum posts. So some people do this with plugins and scripts, they pull them out. The nicest way I've seen is by using other means of company communication. So things like a company newsletter or a web page where it's highlighted. Someone curates through the forums and goes, well, actually, we've got John here has made the most popular post this week. It's a really good explanation of how to do this task in the workplace. Go and check it out, and it's mentioned in the company newsletter. And the nice thing is you get a positive kind of reinforcement loop by getting that sort of nod from people, company-wide. So if you're, working really hard, but you took half an hour out to answer some questions on the Moodle forum, and then the head of HR gives you a special mention in the newsletter, that's really nice encouragement and can actually then pull people forward into, contributing more and helping more. Now we've also seen, as we said before, gradebooks publicly displayed. Now, sometimes this could be the entire gradebook to see all the tracking. But what some tutors will do is just pull out scores for certain things. So they might say, right, well, we're just going to do the end of topic 1 quiz. What I'll do is post out the scores as people submit them on Friday afternoon. On a Monday, you can all come in and see what's going on. Now, you have to be a little bit careful here that you're not kind of naming and shaming someone for doing really badly. You don't want to put someone off. But if everyone's doing reasonably well, and then you're trying to incentivize them, particularly if you're working in teams, you can often find that putting the scores out there will show a little bit of competition, who's doing better, who's doing worse. But also you'll find that the better people, the people who have scored well, often are then trying to help out the weaker people. If the scores are for the team as a whole, you're going, right, well, if we can pull James's score up slightly, then as a whole we'll be improving, and that'll be really good for the team. And it's nice for those people that are scoring well to see themselves as mentors and the more experienced members of staff. Because the great thing is, with a lot of workplaces, you've got a lot of people who actually know the stuff you're trying to train them on. If you're doing health and safety training, they may have had it before. If you're doing on-the-job training, you've often got people who've been doing the job for years, and they know exactly how to do the job. So why not let them get a really high score and prove that they are the best at that, but then turn that into a way of them mentoring the weaker members of staff into scoring better and being a stronger team as a whole. So it's a brilliant way to kind of tap that natural wish to be a leader and be a key member of staff, but turn it to kind of the training team's advantage. Now, we've mentioned badges already. These are a great way to get people motivated. And what I found with clients has worked the best is a mixture of what we call public and private badges. So the public badges are the ones that you talk about. So if you score really well on this quiz, you'll get a badge. If you complete all the mandatory induction training, you'll get a badge. If you complete this core competency, you'll get a badge. And it's mentioned in the courses, it's explained. These are things that people get badges for. Now, the private badges are really useful for doing the idea of kind of secret rewards. So it's not secret in so much as that once they've awarded it, they can tell everyone else, but you don't make a big song and dance about where those badges are. So perhaps there's a badge if you've actually read every single policy document that HR's put out. That might be an achievement and you unlock a badge. Or perhaps we put out some new training and everyone who does that training within the first week gets a badge for doing it quickly. And what you'll find is if users get used to the idea that there are some badges floating around that they might not know about, you often find they're putting in a little bit more effort to try to find them, and or maybe if I complete this quiz really well, I'll get a badge. Oh, well, I didn't this time, but maybe actually the badge is attached to dealing with this PDF or upload this assignment. And what's great then is people get really excited and start even gossiping about where these badges are. I've seen environments where people are having water cooler conversations about, by the way, have you spotted the badge in the HR compliance course? People go, no, there's a badge in there, and then suddenly people are off and completing it. And what's really great is people like that kind of hidden knowledge idea. It's a common thing, when you're trying to engage employees, if they feel that they're particularly valued and that they've got some kind of hidden knowledge, it gives them a great sense of kind of self-worth. What's great with hidden badges is they can then share that. There's nothing bad about sharing it. And other people can then sort of be brought into the club of people that know about these badges. What's great that way is to get into that club, they're engaging with your BLE, they're taking your training, they're passing the training, and then they get the badges. So it's a brilliant way of kind of pulling them along into that process. Now, the last one that I've seen with clients that can be controversial in some environments but has worked really well is to remember that not all reward-based systems have to be conducted solely within Moodle. So one of the biggest incentive-driven schemes we've seen with a client is someone who had a lot of user-generated content, so things like glossaries and forums and wikis. And what the training team would do is analyze the things that are being fed in and the content being fed in, and they'd manage to get budget to purchase tablet devices, in this case iPads, but it could be others. And anyone who gave a consistent approach to doing really good work, so the idea of them being like a helpful Moodler on the Moodle forums or a regular tester or something like that, they'd actually get awarded an iPad and be given one from company stock and say, right, that's yours now as a reward. And the nice thing is that people were really encouraged by this, but also really trying to compete to be the best performer to then trigger that reward. So the key thing to remember is it doesn't necessarily have to mean that all of the rewards are Moodle-based and badge-based. You can link this sort of thing in with your normal HR reward engagement processes. I've seen people give time off, an early finish, extended lunch breaks, away days, and all this sort of thing for people that are really engaged in e-learning. Now, in the spirit of sharing, a lovely Wikipedia logo in 3D there, I wanted to kind of go through what our advice would be. We often get clients come to us and say, right, you guys are the experts, design us a plan, tell us how we need to do kind of our gamification. So what I've kind of come up with is a broad plan to kind of give you guys some kicking off points that obviously you'll need to tailor for your organizations or your clients if you're a reseller or something like that. Now the first thing is you need to have a broader employee motivation plan. So motivating them to engage in e-learning is great, but what you don't want to do is have everything operate in isolation. So you need to start looking at engaging with the general HR processes, and how do you deal with employee retention, and make the rewards and achievements on your VLE part of that. And as a subset of that, you need to have a strategy for what you're trying to get out of these reward schemes. They do take time to set up. What you need to decide is what's our end goal, what's our success factor, to say. So is it that everyone completes a mandatory training? Is it that you have so many more logins per week? And this will vary from workplace to workplace, but what you want to make sure is that you have that end goal in sight, because then you can report on it. And if you want to move to some of the more expensive things like time off, like iPads, the trick will be to report on that to your senior management. If you can evidence and say, right, well, since we've brought in badges, compliance training has gone up 80%. Now we think if we bring in iPads as a potential reward, it will go up to 100%. You can start to evidence that over time and really show that you're developing a good return on investment for the training team, which again will encourage more investment in you in the future if you're seen to be a useful team. Another aspect of advice to give to people getting started with gamification in their workplace is to target specific types of training. Now what this means is that people get used to training being gamified and sort of expecting there to be badges and such, with what we'd call the high throughput sessions. So the key ones for high throughput in an average business would be your induction. Obviously everyone who starts the company is inducted, and often these days you'll find a lot of your inductees might be younger members of staff, or might be graduates who are very familiar with using things like Moodle from universities or colleges or other employers, and they come in, and as far as they're concerned, they always use Moodle. It's there on day one, and they're used to it. And you'll find that even these new employees can start bringing some of your more experienced employees along, because someone in the office is saying, oh, I can't find that form for HR, I've got no idea I'm supposed to submit it. And the new guy actually knows. He'll often chirp up and go, oh, actually, that was on my induction. It's on the VLE. It's here. What's great with that is that those new people often are trying to find their footing, try to get their purpose sorted out, and you're giving them a really easy way of being useful to their colleagues and having that, as we said, secret information. So I think induction is a brilliant way of starting to get some of your employees in, and it's also a good way to test new ideas and new features. You often have a small subset, maybe one or two, maybe up to 15 or 20 is usually the top end for an induction program. And if you've got that sort of limited audience, it's a brilliant way of testing a new idea and testing a new feature. The other side for your high throughput courses is your mandatory training. So in most workplaces, this would as a minimum include things like health and safety training, manual handling training, fire safety training, that sort of thing. Most sectors have additional training. So if you're in the finance sector, there'll be various compliance trainings connected with that. Healthcare will have various clinical and hygiene trainings you've got to complete. Now these can be really good courses to target first with your new features, because if everyone has to do them, let's say every 12 months, then that in 12 months everyone will have seen a course that's been gamified. And that's really great for you to kind of know that you're getting out there and being seen. And then it's much easier to pick up the other courses and the non-obligatory courses in CPD. They'll probably have a more limited audience, but people are already exposed to the idea that training comes with these gamified features, and things like badges and open gradebooks won't be a surprise to them when they then engage in some voluntary continued professional development training. The other idea that's really useful for most workplaces is to soft launch some features. This echoes back to what we were saying about secret knowledge and unexpected badges. If you're thinking of launching, let's say, a leadership board, just do it. Obviously get the clearance of relevant managers, but you don't necessarily have to announce it to all staff. Put it up there and start seeing who notices. And again, it comes back to those water cooler ideas, where people will start to talk about, oh, by the way, have you seen the gradebook's open now, or have you seen that there's a leadership board for training and our team's third? That's really good. people will begin to talk about, how this has impacted them and how you can see. And by keeping an ear out for those conversations, you can also get a vibe for what things go down well, what things go down badly, and sort of adapt your response as time goes on. And the nice thing is, by trialing it like that, you are very much trialing. You've not had to do a mass announcement and everything else. So if you trial something and you find, let's say, Open Gradebooks doesn't work for your company, it's not the right corporate environment for it, then fine, turn them off again, and it was just a test. Whereas if it takes on, and people get used to it and enjoy it, that's when you can do your PR and your announcements that this is now a policy based on the initial, successful test that happened. So I'll leave it there for kind of our suggested plan. I don't want to go on too far because, as I found in my experience, there are lots of things that really you need to tailor to your environment. Every employer is different, whether you're a school, whether you're a business, and a lot of these ideas will apply to schools as well. But the trick is to take what kind of I've said as a starting point, and then use that as a beginning to form your own plans, to form your own development cycles, to know where you want to go with gamification in your workplace and where you want to go with e-learning as a whole. As I said right at the beginning, I'm always happy to be contacted by people in the community. I've put these slides up on the main course, and I'll put the contact information in there in plain text as well if you need it. So my email address is just ben.wagner@webanywhere.co.uk. I'm on that every day UK time, so feel free to send me an email. I'll get back to you when I can. Or you can find me on Twitter at benwagner1988, or my LinkedIn profile's there. So feel free to connect with me in any of those ways. Particularly if you're in the future and watching this back on YouTube, you can always get hold of me if you've missed out on the opportunity to ask me any questions live. Now, I will open the floor up to questions. If anyone has any kind of burning questions they want to ask me now, please either turn on your mic and say hi or post them in the chat. But if not, you can always come back to me later or ask me a private question via email or Twitter or the like. And once again, thank you all for listening, and thank you to Wendy and her team for all the work they do in the background. The second life link, I hadn't actually used that, I'm afraid. It might be worth throwing up a post on the Moodle plugins forum. That might be something people might be aware of there. In terms of setting up leaderboards, I think the quickest way and the first way of doing it is do it relatively manually, put it on a course, look at the gradebook and summarize it. Longer term, I've seen people develop plugins using PHP to reference parts of the database. But the nice thing is to start off by doing it just as a manual board, maybe summarize it by team. I've seen people export the gradebooks to Excel and then do the data analysis there, do nice little graphs, and then throw them off into the site. And what's nice is you can then start pulling out which teams are doing the best and which staff are doing the best, and kind of have various gradebooks there. Not to worry about the mic issues, Wendy. I lost my webcam earlier today, so it happens to the rest of us. I'll stay on the line for a little bit longer if anyone needs anything, but if not, please feel free to, as I said, send me an email, add me on Twitter, or message me on LinkedIn. Absolutely fine to get in touch with me in any of those ways and have a chat, or just let me know what you guys are up to. I'd love to hear your stories and how things go with you in future. Hordes of dogs. My cat attacked me last year, but it's been quite well behaved this year. That's great, Dorothy. We have to let me know how they get on. Maybe get them in to see the recording, and let me know how you get on implementing things. You're very much welcome, and thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. I'll be repeating this on Sunday evening my time. It's in the schedule for your own time zone. So if you do have any colleagues or anyone else, you can pull them into that session as well if you want to see a repeat. To answer Anne's questions, the leadership. Meredith's questions first. I'll do them in order. Leadership boards, in terms of the gradebook, you can kind of do them how you like. The way I've seen it done with clients before is that they take the scores in the gradebook, and maybe copy them into Excel, something like that, and do crunching by teams, so you can see which teams are doing the best, and then put that up, using the custom HTML block or something like that, in a table with the rankings of teams, and often HR or training admin will update that on like a weekly basis. I've seen a couple of people go down the route of trying to develop code to kind of pull into it, but that's a bit more complicated. And yeah, Meredith, I'll type that answer back out in just a second. And that's good, Anne, to see about the mobile type. We have to throw it up on the forum or potentially on the Moodle.org forum so we can all have a look. You're more than welcome, Meredith. As I said, if anything comes up later, you can always drop me an email and I'll see what I can do.